Okay.
Oh, right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Pete Isgrig, and I'm with Western Digital and SanDisk. Thank you for coming to our event today with Cliff Mautner, and thank you, Adorama, for hosting us. We always love coming to you guys and talking with you and bringing you some, very interesting and unique photographers and photography advice. So, with that said, I have Cliff here today, and he's going to talk to you about wedding photography because it is Wedding Photography Week at Adorama. So they have a whole, week, or actually, I think it might be 2 weeks planned with lots of promotions, lots of advice, lots of videos, and everything for those of you who are looking into getting into wedding photography. So I'm going to pass it over to Cliff. He's going to, talk to you guys. But before I do, I just want to point out there is a raffle at this event for our SanDisk Extreme Portable SSD 1 terabyte, this little drive right here. If you want to enter that, go to Adorama's 42 Live page, which is how most of you are probably watching this anyway right now. There, and you scroll to the bottom, there is a little raffle form where you fill out your name and email address to enter into that raffle. So please do so. And that said, oh, and also, if you have any questions, please put them into the YouTube chat there, and I will be monitoring that, and I'll be talking with Cliff about those questions. I'll be asking him your questions. So please do. We want to get we want to get you the answers that you guys are seeking.
Thanks, Pete.
Yep.
So I'm Cliff Mautner. I'm a wedding photographer, Nikon Ambassador, and a SanDisk professional ambassador as well. I am thrilled here to be in my studio. I wish I was in person with everyone. Unfortunately, that's not the case at the moment. Talking into a camera here, I'm in my studio. I'm speaking into my Yeti mic with my Nikon Z6 II with a 35-1.8 pointed at my face. I've got a Stella CLX-10 there. I got a Stella CLX-10 there. Why am I talking about all that? Because all that gear are things I use for weddings.
Oh, Cliff, I'm
yes.
going to interrupt you. I think your video is paused, or your video has stopped working. We're just
that's just wonderful, isn't it now? Okay.
Exactly. It starts the exact moment you have to talk is the exact moment your video decides it wants to pause you.
Okay, well, let's figure out what's going on here, Pete. Give me 1 second. I have no idea why that happened. Come on now. Let me turn the camera on and off again. Wonderful.
Sorry for the technical difficulties. We will continue momentarily. So that said, as we're waiting for that, I see a few of you have put into the chat where you're from. Please, give us some more insight into where you guys are coming from, because I love these virtual events in that, people come from all over the world now to these. So I love to see where you guys are coming from. So I'm here in New York. I'm actually a couple blocks from where Adorama is. So I get in there quite frequently. We got some people from New Mexico. We got more from New York. A few of you guys from New York City. San Fran. I love it. Dallas, Texas.
I'm giving it a try here, Pete. I don't know why it's not starting. I can't even click on start video. Did the host do anything to prevent me from using my video? Because I can't even click on start video.
Akiva, I don't know if you are Cliff, maybe try quitting Zoom real quick and
I'm going to log out and log on again. Sorry, folks. Yeah, here I go. I'm going to disappear.
All right. Well, hopefully he will be back momentarily. That said, if you guys have any questions, well, you got me. I am, here with SanDisk, and I can answer any product questions if you've got it. So hopefully, let us know what you guys are thinking, and we'll go from there. Akiva, what else is planned for Wedding Photography Week? Are there any other virtual events coming up, or in-store events, or things like that? I can hear you, so I'm hoping they can hear you. Oh, apparently, I guess there is no audio. Okay, your audio is not coming through to the other people. It comes through to me. That's odd. All right. So, all right. Well, that's not gonna work then. But he was saying that there are some more events, so to check out Adorama's website and hopefully you guys can partake in some more of these wedding photography activities and events that they've got going on. Okay, so last year we did a similar event when it was Wedding Photography Week with Cliff, where he talked about what gear, what lighting equipment, what cameras, what hard drives, what storage solutions, what memory cards, all the gear that you need for wedding photography. He talked about that last year. We have that event recording, and that will be also posted in 42 Live and on their YouTube page at some point. So.
I think they should be able to either open up the volume on OBS and make that higher. So they should be able to hear me now. Hi, everyone. Usually not speaking on the camera, but we have some tech issues. We appreciate everyone's patience. Cliff should be back any moment now. And yeah, if you're in the New York City area, always check out Adorama. We're bringing back in-store events a lot more. We're going to try to stream them, hopefully, to this channel. So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. The channel's pretty new, but we're going to be uploading content as much as we can. Long events, short event clips, streams of in-person events and demos. Really.
Akiva, Cliff says he's waiting to be let into the room. Can you yes. Can you let him into the Zoom room?
Yes.
All right. Again, everyone, we apologize for the technical difficulties there. All right, Cliff, I think we can see you, and you are moving. We're not hearing you, though.
It was pretty fun. It was as soon as he started speaking. It was working. I was talking to Cliff for a half hour before.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We were
on the pre-call.
Right,
we were trying everything. It worked perfectly. And as soon as he started speaking, that's just how it goes sometimes.
Still can't hear you. It says you did not connect to the audio. I don't know why it's not working for him.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, now we can.
All right, I disconnected the Yeti, but listen, I don't know what's going on. Everything was working as technology does.
Exactly. All right, no worries. We're glad you're back.
I apologize for the echo. Basically, what I was saying was I'm here in my studio. It's very difficult to do these things via Zoom, but I've done enough of them. I'm kind of looking at my Z6 II and my 3518. It is wedding season, and it is starting to get very busy. Fortunately, it hasn't been that busy over the past couple of years. 22 was a little busier than 21, of course. 23 is pretty decent, and I have 2 weddings this weekend, Memorial Day weekend. I am going to go over what I call the anatomy of a wedding day. And basically what that is, I'm going to talk about the various elements of the day, what gear I'm going to use, and I'm also relying on questions from those that are watching to kind of help me out here, rather than have me just talk to this lens for 45 minutes to an hour. I'd love to help you and help answer your questions and sort of take it from there. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this thing isn't going to get mad at me. And let's see if this works. All right, I'm going to come here. Come on now, and boom. Come on, crossing my fingers. Hey, what do you know? So,
hey, and your video is still working.
A presentation. So as I said, I am a Nikon ambassador for the United States and a very proud representative of SanDisk. They're ambassadors, I guess we're called now. You know, workflow is an important element in any photographer's business whatsoever. So I am going to also talk a little bit about what I use, my gear, then after a wedding, what I do with those types of things. But right off the bat, I'm going to begin just with a little bit of information, my Instagram. And here is some gear that I take to a wedding, okay? And of course, all of this stuff is in a nice big giant bag that I roll around, my assistant rolls around. But if you look at the top, the Nikon Z9 and the Nikon Z8. Well, I shot my first wedding with the Z8 2 weeks ago. And for those of you that were waiting for a, quote, baby Z9, it's here. It is here. And with my arthritis in my shoulders, my Z9, which is an absolute thoroughbred, it was a big thoroughbred though. And it was giving me some pain in my shoulders and my neck, and just, it's pretty tough on the body when you're carrying it for 10 hours. The Z8 literally has answered any prayers that I had for a camera that is just all-encompassing. And I'm thrilled to be using that. If you notice, I do take a lot of lenses. I just put the 85 1.2 in my bag, and it is yet to be determined whether or not that is going to usurp my 105 f1.4 for my DSLR. I use an adapter with my 105 on my Z cameras, but let me tell you, the 85 1.2 is incredibly fast focusing. I used it for reception stuff the other night, so it's making my 105 a little jealous right now. So I thought I'd never give up my 105. So to just move on, I have an FTZ adapter. Right now, I don't have the 14 to 24. That is my next Z lens. Another thing that you can get at Adorama is the FJ200, which is my my strobe of choice for weddings. It's a 200 watt second light, wonderful trigger, never fails. And I use the SanDisk Cinema Pro cards, which are twice as fast as the prior cards, the Extreme Pro cards that I had, and lots of other accessories. And my favorite little video light is my Light Motion Stellar Pro CLX10, which you can also get at Adorama. There's my Z9. Now, for those that were curious about the Z8, if you look in the middle here, that is the new Nikon Z8. It is much smaller than the Z9, and it's even smaller than the D850, which, you know, I was hoping that it might be the same size as the 850, but it's actually smaller. So I'm really thrilled about that. My Z6 II, which I'm using right now to do this recording, this is also something that has a place. I put my 35-1.8 on it. I never take it off my shoulder at a wedding. And the ISO performance of this camera is spectacular. So I can go into pretty much any situation and come out with pictures with this camera. So it's more of a PJ lens for me. I'll use it for wedding prep. I'll use it for, I'm back in the sacristy with the groom, or I'm in a crowded spot with a bride. This is the camera that I use for that with that lens. I think it's stellar. Mirrorless has changed the world of photography. And, you know, I'm going to show this next image here just to give you a sense of, you know, I don't want to answer the question why you should switch to mirrorless, but for me, it's you have to work pretty hard to screw up a photograph. You have to work hard to screw up an exposure. With these cameras now, the eye is focused upon with the eye autofocus. You can see through an electronic viewfinder what your exposure needs to be. And I'm using this photograph right here to represent some of the benefits. Earlier in my career, when I would use a DSLR, I might have had to take a picture and take a look at it on the back of the LCD to determine whether or not I really nailed the exposure. Why is it so important here? Well, behind this couple is the Delaware River. The entire ceremony was in deep shadow. It was cast by a mansion. And the exposure value of the area in shadow was a great deal different, way under what the exposure was of the river behind them. The river just goes white. You can't see anything that's in the water. I mean, it's probably 8 to 10 stops different. It's blown out to smithereens. Now, when I use my mirrorless camera, I just look through this and I can nail this exposure without even thinking about it. So it's really changed things. So if you're a little bit less experienced and you're thinking about the world of photography, yes, the learning curve has definitely been lowered, but you can take my workshop in July and catch up. That is one of my favorite PJ lenses, which is being used right now. 7200 is in my bag. The 24 to 70 is in my bag. I used to carry a 24 to 70 f4, which is much less expensive than the 2.8, but is also a very versatile, very sharp piece of glass. This is my next lens, I wanted to point out. This lens is going to be purchased. I use this at receptions a lot. It's a great focal length. It's a 24 to 120. The FTZ2 adapter, you can use any of your 350 plus Nikkor lenses on any of your mirrorless cameras using that. And this is my F lens. This is a 105 f1.4, which has been my favorite of all time, but maybe being replaced by this, which I just purchased a couple weeks ago. These cards are really pretty incredible. The write speed, Pete can probably elaborate a little bit later, but these are twice as fast as the cards that I was using before. From a workflow standpoint, when you get home, the upload speed when you're downloading, the time it takes you to offload your cards, it's mind-blowing how fast these things are these days. It used to take quite some time to come home and download your work and back it up. With an external hard drive like this, my work from start to finish, as soon as I'm home, by the time I download 4,000 or 5,000 images and back it up to a drive like this, it might only be about 35, 40 minutes total, which is pretty darn remarkable. To start the day, when I walk in, just to give you a little deeper insight into my mindset, I walk in and I'm very small. I try to be as small as possible. I don't want to walk in larger than life. I don't want to walk in and create attention to myself. This is a woman's world. So I try to be very, very small in stature, and I'll ask for some details. One of the first things I'll do is find a little bit of an area that might be very clean for my background for some detail photos. I have a 105 macro for my Z camera that I'm going to use for this. And one of the things that people need to keep in mind is you need a fair amount of light, because I want to shoot this at least, I'd say f8, f11, or even f16, because the closer you are to that item, the more shallow the depth of field will be. And as you can see, very, very little is in focus on the focal plane. And I probably shot this at least f16. So the closer you get, the more shallow the depth of field. I'm not one to really go crazy for, a ton of detail shots. Of course, they're a necessary part of the day. They do tell a continuing story. What's important to the bride is what's important to me. So I'll shoot the shoes, I'll shoot the rings, I'll shoot whatever she asks. A couple of weeks ago, the bride didn't care about details. Perhaps this weekend, they're going to care about details. I'm simply going to ask, what can I shoot for you? And here's, a bunch of rings. There's a family heirloom in the foreground there with some items in the background. Very simply, I'm using my macro lens. I'm using a Stella CLX10 to give me a little extra light so I can get up to f16 or so. So that's a little bit about details. And maybe the most important thing about details is ask, what's important? Do you have any sentimental details? This particular bride really had a sentimental detail. What you're looking at is an envelope, And the bride handed me an envelope where every single bride in her family since 1887 signed that envelope and carried that handkerchief down the aisle. I was blown away. And then I had her signing it, and then I actually had her hold the handkerchief because I think it's a lot more meaningful than having it sit on a bed or a table. So just a little bit about details, how I go about that. Some wedding preparation. I'm not comparing myself to Rembrandt. I don't want anyone to say, oh, Cliff Mautner thinks he's Rembrandt. He is an inspiration. Rembrandt to me represents perhaps the most extraordinary use of light that I do my best to maybe not emulate, but I'm inspired by. And his use of texture and dimension and mood, and his use of direction with light, his use of shadows and highlights, to me, epitomize just what fine art represents. It's telling stories with light that I think very few greats were really able to do as well as Rembrandt. And so I like to take that, and my own little saying is, shadow is my canvas, light is my paint. If I ever have an epitaph, if I ever have anything written on my photographic grave, maybe this might be it. And so in this image, for example, you might say, oh, that image is kind of dark. Well, the shadow areas indeed are my canvas, if you will. And then I like to take some of the light that's in this, and I like to make sure that it's in the right spots. So I'll take that little sliver of light on that little girl's face and make that the most important part of this photograph. And hopefully your eye goes right to that face. And this to me is, you know, one of the best representations of how I like my images to appear. The other thing that I'll do is I like to say when I'm doing wedding preparation is set the stage for moments to take place without staging the moments. And if I walk into a room and like here with this bride, I walked in, her name was Kate, and I walked in and she said, do you want me to read this letter from Stephen? And I said, yeah, I think that would be great. She said, where would you like me to read it? And I said, well, how about right here in this great light? But I did not have any part in having the bridesmaids stand in certain spots. That was all them. She just read it. I had a 24-70 on my camera. I just made a few frames. I captured the emotions. And, you know, years later, this is probably 15 years old. Years later, this is still a pretty powerful image, and it still stands the test of time to me. And that's what I'm going to be talking about a little bit later, is images that stand the test of time. Here, I asked, again, setting the stage, I asked the bride and her mom to go over by the window and just talk to each other and, you know, interact. And maybe there's some things that they wanted to say to each other and they hadn't that day. Those were the words that I gave to them and the instructions, and that's really it. The rest is up to them. It's not an accident that I had them stand by the light, and it's not an accident that the dress was on the other side. The composition was deliberate, but the moment was theirs. Once again, this is, you know, deliberate composing, deliberate staging, if you will, but the moment, once again, is all the client's. Sometimes the shadow as my canvas is not there. Sometimes instead of juxtaposing highlights against shadows, you juxtapose shadows against highlights. There were no dark drapes. There was no canvas, if you will. So I just took this bride and her dad and used the light to create this very, I'm not going to use the word light and airy. I chuckle when I say that, but I am going to use the word sort of dreamy, and blew the background out deliberately. Once again, this is probably my 105. I didn't have the 85 at the time. Standing back a little bit, letting them talk, giving them their freedom to interact, and I'm not being intrusive by being very close. I want to caution people about wedding preparation, use of, say, a 24-70 all the time. I think it's a mistake to go in and just use one lens for wedding preparation personally. I think varying your focal length, varies the images that come to your mind's eye. And I think using a 24-70 all the time can be a little bit of a crutch. And I also think it could be a little bit boring. So I use a couple of different lengths for this wedding prep stage. This is a 105. And yes, it looks a little bit more staged because it is. There's more staging. There's a little more set direction, if you will. And these were nieces and bridesmaids together here. And she wanted everybody in the photo. And I just said, all right, just go screw around with the gown. And, you know, she's talking to her maid of honor and everybody else is doing their thing, put her in good light. So this was a very deliberate image. She loved it. I can't call it photojournalism because it's not, but it's still a pretty striking image, in my opinion. Beautiful venue, by the way. Once again, just kind of setting a stage for this to take place. I would, there was some clutter going on in the room, and it was a nice moment being shared by the father and the daughter. So I just kind of closed the door a little bit to add a little bit of framing to the scene, if you will. And so the sides of this image are deliberately cut off, shot it with probably a 35mm lens into this room, almost a photographic voyeur, if you will. And this image is stuck with me. I kind of like the look on Dad's face, maybe because I have a couple of daughters. Once again, setting the stage. That's his son who's helping him with his tie. But it's no accident that he has a little highlight on his face. I'll also do some individual portraits during the wedding prep, whether it's a groom, whether it's a bride, after they're sort of dressed and ready. I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to do some individual portraits just either in the hotel room or a home or someplace like that. This bride was looking out at her wedding venue. She was looking at all the people gathering for the ceremony. And I made sure that I shot this with a long lens so I wouldn't go too close and not startle her, but I wanted this to be as organic as possible. This is as real as it gets because she is really looking out. She's observing the people coming to her wedding. I like to take an 85 or a 105, now back to an 85. The 85 used to be my favorite lens until my 105 got in my bag. And now the 85 1.2 just might be my go-to axe. I really am enjoying this lens. But I like to stand above the bride just a little bit, and I like to shoot down. I like to capture the eyes or the eyelashes in focus, very shallow depths of field. I think it's a really powerful image. And I also like to light it a little bit differently as well. I don't like to have the light directly behind me. I like it to be a little bit angular, mainly because of this guy Rembrandt again. This is a portrait of a young woman. I don't know how young she looks. I don't mean to insult this wonderful subject. I hope she forgives me. I'm sure she's really old right now. But see, that's the thing about Zoom, that's probably a really crappy joke. I don't know. I don't know if people chuckle. I don't know if people are like, wow, this guy's got a really corny sense of humor. But, I'm looking straight at the camera. There might be one person watching. There might be nobody watching. But, it's Zoom. So, sorry for the bad jokes. I'm just sitting here talking in a 2,000 square foot space with absolutely nobody here but myself. So the heck with it. Portrait of a young woman. The term Rembrandt lighting stems from this photograph. If you notice that little shadow on the left side of her face, or what we're looking at, it's our right side, that little shadow adds dimension. Direction is what creates dimension. And here, for example, I'm using one of my Stella CLX10 lights in an umbrella, and it's fairly close, but I have it to the side just a little bit. If I had it directly behind me, directly in front of the subject, and it's creating no shadow whatsoever, it would probably be fine, but maybe it wouldn't add a little drama. It wouldn't add a little dimension. And I think the dimension here really works for this lovely model of mine. This was a camera campaign. I think this was either the 780, it might have been the 780 campaign. And I used this woman, Nina, who was one of America's Next Top Models. Wonderful to work with, and just did a few portraits of her. This is Broadway actress Shobha Narayan. I shot her wedding. And again, just a little bit of an angle with the light. This is my 105, very shallow depth of field, probably shot this at 1.4, but I like that little bit of angle. This is also another wonderful South Asian bride. So if the light was coming directly behind me, okay, I would really flatten out the dimension and there would be no texture, no real drama to this image. So do your best when you're doing some of your portraits to give this direction, to play around with direction and give yourself a little diversity. Move the light around and see what you like. Maybe you won't like it, but I think it's certainly worth a try. The drama of light exists not only what is in the frame, but also, you know what, I can't even move my little thing. What is in the light, but also what is left dark. If the light is everywhere, the drama's gone. I have some quotes on my screen, but I can't get out of my screen because this is Zoom and I can't move my little thingy here, which tells me all kinds of stuff. And hey, it's Zoom, you know? So what did J. Maisel mean? He meant what I think is a wonderful interpretation by my friend Dave Black, who said, if you want to make a photograph look interesting, light only part of it, which is basically a paraphrase of what Jay said. And that's stuck with me. So when you see my images, again, you might say, and clients have sometimes said, wow, I like that, but isn't it kind of dark? I will say, no, this image is not dark. The highlights are exposed well. Are there other areas of the photo that are dark? Yes, they are left dark deliberately. Another thing that I'll do when I'm shooting these portraits or I'm at a wedding or capturing images in general, I'll ask questions. This man was a recently commissioned officer in the military, and he had these little items there. And to be honest with you, I'm an ignorant guy when it comes to military. I don't know exactly what they are, but he explained them to me. It went in one ear and out the other, and I knew that these were important. He was very proud of them. So I did a very static portrait, very solitary portrait of this man. And it was one of his favorites throughout the day. I still like it. I still think it stands the test of time. But if I didn't ask the question, what is this? I wouldn't have found out that this is important to him. This was a Korean wedding, very traditional Korean wedding, where this bride, her family was Korean. I walk in and this is her family's living room. And it was just incredibly traditional, almost looked like a church. But I asked, you know, is this how the living room always looks? And it was. And I just figured I wanted to take a portrait of this couple in this living room in a really formal setting so that it would be timeless. I think this image would be just as relevant 100 years from now. If I sepiaed this image, if I made this like a tone, you wouldn't know that it wasn't taken 100 years ago. So that's kind of what I like about the image. This groom had a son, and his son was named after his father, who has passed recently and is in this frame. It was very emotional. I asked if he was okay, and he said, well, I'm thinking about my dad. And I said, is this a photo of your dad? He said, yes, it is. And I said, can I take a picture of you holding them? And he loved it. This was a very important photograph for him that day. So if I didn't ask a question, I wouldn't have been able to make this image for him. And this is very similar. This is this bride's mom. So similar story, different event. Ask questions. So she's reading a letter from her groom here, and I wanted to make sure that we photographed that for her. This is a very moving image to me, being a Jewish American. This is I was in a synagogue. These are Holocaust survivors. This is a few years ago, and we were in a synagogue where there was a little Holocaust memorial, and I asked if I could take a portrait of them in front of this, and they agreed. And you could see the personality differences here. Him being very proud and very solemn, and her, she was just really funny. And this is one of my favorite portraits I've ever taken. You might say, it's not so good, but to me, it is. To me, it meant something. To the couple, it meant something. So ask questions. So then we get to sort of the body of the wedding, other elements. We have a first look here. And first looks to me, I started doing these things back in the year 2000. I may or may not have been the first one to do it. And I know you might say, well, no, you weren't, but they weren't really doing first looks back in 2000. I talked about it in 2004 at WPPI, and I called it Couples Seeing Each Other for the First Time. And it was really to get more portraits because couples didn't want to see each other before the wedding because they wanted that intimacy. Well, I create the intimacy by the setting, by the surrounding, by the isolation. I don't let bridesmaids or groomsmen, egg them on and scream at them and you tell them to get a room during a first look. The bridesmaids aren't screaming, ooh, wow. People get inhibited when people are looking on. And this first look was really adorable. I had her in the perfect spot. He came on and boom. It was just a really, really nice scene. You'll be really surprised what you can get if you set up a first look in an organic way and let them just do their thing. One of my favorites, very emotional here. This is right after they saw each other. Beautiful. Again, wonderful reactions. This is also another lovely scenario here, just frame after frame of them in a very organic setting. I used to be known, and people used to come to my workshops, shameless plug, July 11th and 12th, cmbootcamp.com. Go to it. If you're interested, you can sign up for information about it. I think I only have 2 or 3 spots left. It's truly a wonderful experience. Google Cliff Mautner Lighting and Skillset Bootcamp, and I think you'll see that it's helped a lot of people. 42 countries, 1,000 students from 42 countries have come here over 15 years to learn from me. So the reason I mentioned it, I used to be known as the guy that can shoot in harsh light, any kind of light. And I still am, and I still like harsh light. Shade is not the only answer, nor is it my preference. Why do I say that? I can be at a wedding and there might be a cinematographer there and he'll say to me, boy, I love this overcast day. Isn't this good for you? And I'll say, no, actually, it kind of sucks. He'll say, why? I'll say, there's no texture to that light. There's nothing there. There's no drama that exists with that type of light. So I'm not a big fan of overcast flat light. So I prefer harsh light. And I like to use that harsh light. The secret to using that harsh light is to put your subject between you and the sun, exposed for faces, not veils. The veil may blow out. Sometimes it's a compromise, but I'm telling you, it is worth it. And I like to say that I make bad light good light. This isn't good light. This is really bad light. This is a scenario that I came across, and I did if you Google Nikon behind the scenes video with me, this is how to shoot in harsh light. And I put these people directly in the sun at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And then all I did was had them about face. And I did this. Now, there is no fill flash. There is no fill light. There is no reflector. This is just simply exposure value on the face. And that's it. Keeping my subject between me and the sun. That's all I did. Right there. Bingo. No issues. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. No fill light. All right. So general portraits. Let's talk a little bit about some portraits. Once again, I love the direction. One of my favorite areas to shoot is inside City Hall in Philadelphia. And that was that last image. This was this was for the Nikon Z9. One of the first images I made with the Z9. I had a pre-production model here, and wonderful bride. Forget her name actually, but she was pretty spectacular. This is a real client. Gianna is her name. Thank you, Gianna, for being such a great client. She agreed to do some of these for me. But I tried to isolate with very shallow depth of field. This is shot at 1.4. Why? Well, I like to isolate. I like this portrait to be about just my subject. I like to isolate with long lenses, and I like to get nice and tight. This is my friend Corey. This is for a camera campaign from a few years back. This is a 70-200. And again, isolation. Here I'm isolating the couple. Okay. So fill your frame with your subjects. One question I'm asked almost at every single workshop is exposures. How do I photograph a person of dark complexion with a person that is light complected? The answer that I sarcastically give is properly. After a bunch of answers, I'll ask the question, how do I do this? How do I expose for this? Someone will say, well, open up a little bit for the darker complected individual. Well, what's going to happen to the lighter complected person? Vice versa. It's all wrong. The answer is properly. If I took a meter and I held it up, that's my exposure. I don't have to worry about what is right and what is wrong. Exposure is exposure is exposure. My bride and groom here, this is Mario and his amazing bride. All I'm trying to do is get the highlights here. Highlights are what give dark complected people their dimension, their texture. Okay, this is what I'm looking for. And I don't want to overexpose these highlights on a dark complected person because I don't need to make them lighter than they truly are. I want an accurate depiction through my exposure value. So be careful of blowing highlights. You don't have to overexpose dark complected people. It's wrong. Okay, here is Max. He is Nigerian. His wife was a fairly light-skinned Iranian woman, a Persian woman. Okay, and again, exposure is exposure is exposure. I just exposed for them properly. So that answers that question. Here is an amazing couple, Nikki and Liz, and I was had to make sure that the highlight was going on Nikki, because if it was vice versa, I think there'd be an exposure value issue here. Once again, just that slight little highlight on Nikki's face. That's what I was going for. So another thing I like to do are what I'll just call environmental portraits, okay? Depending upon where you are, this was the Z9 campaign, so it's not an actual wedding. I want to mention that. This is the city of Philadelphia. This is Belmont Plateau, made famous by Will Smith's pretty cool song, Summertime. And this is Nikon's, I think, the 100 to 400 lens. Had to be very secretive about it at the time. It was still pre-production. This is racked out probably close to 400 here, but it encapsulates the environment. I wanted to use the environment here as a background, and in order to do so, okay, I had to use a long lens. I have friends in DC, for example. The way to do those portraits is to use a long lens and put the couple in the foreground and put the Jefferson or Lincoln Memorial in the background. If you use a 24 to 70, it's not going to be as effective. It's not going to have the impact that you would here. I wanted to stay far from the subject, use a long lens, compress the scene, then I can get the couple and the environment in the background. This is atop the Lowe's Hotel. Those are skyscrapers, Liberty One in Philadelphia. This is an environmental portrait in Helsinki, Finland, just using this amazing government building. Again, it's just the environment. This is the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. This is just a beautiful setting. And this is a scenario where it's really just a nice picture of the museum, and I just happen to have a couple in it. So it's an environmental portrait. Once again, getting back to just using texture, dimension, and mood, using direction of light in these photographs. Go through a couple more of these for these environmental portraits. And there we go. I like to use framing as a compositional element in the portraits that I take throughout the day. Give it a little compositional flair, if you will, using them in the windows here. I had just shown this one. Frame it, put her where she can really enhance the composition of this photograph. Sometimes center composition is a compositional element that isn't very desirable, but in this, I think it works here. Framing, once again, putting them between the candles, putting them in between all of these beautiful elements at a place called Front and Palmer in Philadelphia. Again, putting this lovely bride right in that archway there along Kelly Drive in Philadelphia. I'm not a big fan of gazebos, but I wanted to do a silhouette in between that. Framing, another example of framing, just this is her just putting a bride putting her makeup on, having her makeup applied, putting her between the makeup artist and herself in a mirror at a very shallow depth of field. That last one just was a background of this, but you briefly saw it. One of the wonderful technical glitches of Zoom, putting them in that dark frame. Pretty cool. This is a wonderful example of framing as well, to me. Immediately following a ceremony, they had a few minutes themselves. This is a place that is no longer there. COVID shut this place down. One Atlantic at the New Jersey shore in Atlantic City was a pretty cool place to shoot, but we are on literally out on a jetty, if you will, all the way out on a pier in this venue and overlooked the Atlantic Ocean. And she's just showing her ring right after the ceremony. Pretty darn cool. Framing once again. Central Park framing. Similar example, just putting them in the perfect spot of the frame so that the buildings would not distract from the silhouette that I was attempting to capture. Simplicity, another rule that I like to apply to my portraits on a wedding day. Why look past the simple when simple just works? Why get convoluted? Why get complicated? You don't have to get complicated with these portraits. So one of the tools I've been using the last several years is my, and you can get this at Adorama, CLX10. This is a Stella Pro made by a company called Light and Motion. CLX10 is a 10,000 lumen light that I'm being illuminated right now, and it's actually only on 1,000 lumens right now. And there is a background light going through a cookie that has a tungsten gel on it. It actually comes with tungsten gels. That's why the light behind me is a little bit warmer. But what it enables me to do on a wedding day is I can move faster than I can with an actual flash or speed light or any type of strobe. My assistant just points it at the subject. I just get an exposure and I go. I don't have to do any tests. I don't have to do anything at all. There's no trigger, okay, to remotely fire a flash. This is my favorite tool in my bag. My favorite tool in my bag besides my cameras. And this is New York City, and it was an overcast day. I had a little light, a little light there. A darker complected bride where I needed to add a little bit of fill. And this is shot at 5,000 at 1.4. I added a little bit of fill with my CLX10, and it's just beautiful. Once again, adding some fill with the CLX10. This will demonstrate what happens when your assistant accidentally misses with the CLX. You can see the difference with and without, with and without. And that's what it'll do for you. It's really a powerful tool. Shobha Narayan on her wedding night, just adding a little bit of dusk portraiture, if you will, to the repertoire. That's with a regular daylight balanced head, and then also has a tungsten head where I can put it in and I can really sort of play with white balance, put the camera, set it into tungsten white balance, and I let the entire scenario kind of go blue in the sky, which was kind of cool. It was threatening rain here, and this CLX10, this continuous light, my assistant is behind them giving me a little bit of fill there. That brings us to the family portrait section here. And I'm going to go briefly into this because unless you're in my studio and I'm with you personally, it's hard to help every single person I don't know what skill levels there are to really help enhance your know-how or your knowledge of flash photography. But for me, I have to use some type of external light, be it continuous if it's enough, or my Westcott FJ200, or even just a simple flash to film my subjects. So this is a scenario that is a wrong exposure. This is wrong. This is for Nikon behind the scenes from a few years ago. I went from here and then I went to there. And you can see the difference between that and that. And it's just a very simple use of fill flash. Set your camera to expose the background and maybe even go a little bit under the exposure value, and then set your light to expose the subject properly. And here's a bunch, oh, I skipped that one, thanks Zoom. Here's a bunch of images that are done fairly well. I needed a lot of light here, okay? This is, this might have been my Pro Photo B1, 500 watt seconds, because I needed to bring the sky down. So I needed to expose the scene and expose for these people properly. So I needed more light on the people. This was taken around 12 noon. Tough situation. This is 1,000 watt seconds, 2 Pro Photo B1s bounce into umbrellas on a very large grotto party. So there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat, so to speak, to do formals. Look for open shade if possible. Look for simple neutral backgrounds. Get them away from the backgrounds for separation. I like to use long lenses. I like to adjust the angles to control my composition. I expose everything a little bit under by about 1 to 2 stops. And then I use manual or off-camera flash at a slight angle and expose properly. Sometimes you don't need any extra light. Sometimes the sun does it for you, or lack of light does it for you. This is kind of a nice dramatic groomsman photo along that same Delaware River that I showed you, one of the very first photos I showed you. And then lastly, I'll show you that you don't have to use a fast shutter speed to capture these. I think I probably shot this at 1/10 of a second. So when using flash, the flash will freeze the action. When I shoot receptions, I go available when I can, but usually I can't. So I use a voice-activated light stand, my assistant. I'm looking to create texture. Manual flash is more consistent, by the way, than TTL. I try to stay about 2 stops under the ambient. All right, here we go. Super. And follow the timeline and see when you're going to need some external light. I very rarely use flash on camera, except if it's just people dancing on the dance floor. And for everything else, for the first dance, blessing, toasts, parent dances, you name it, I'm using off-camera light. I like to get as much of the ambient light in there as possible so that I'm shooting at a fairly slow shutter speed at times. Sometimes I'm shooting at a fast shutter speed like this, so I eliminate everything in the background to add some drama. All right, I probably shot this at a fairly fast shutter speed because there was a lot of light in the room. Slow shutter speed here, so I allow the ambient light in the room. And just determine what you like, what is comfortable to you, what kind of backgrounds do you like, and that's all determined by the use of your shutter speed. Okay, once you get a proper exposure, you can control your shutter speed. You control your ambient light by just controlling the shutter speed, or you can use just candlelight like this image here. Some night portraits, okay? This is sundown. I like some silhouettes. I like to get a little bit dramatic. I like to maybe close a wedding album with a dramatic photograph. This was a photograph that we really had to hurry to take because people kept saying, what is that? I think it's some silly video, a social media thing where it's like, ooh, a double rainbow. And everybody kept saying, oh, a double rainbow. Well, we ran out. We got it. Got the exposure value real quick. Brought the sky down with my shutter speed. Got the proper exposure on the subject. And within seconds after this, the rainbow was gone. Do you know what kind of questions would have been asked to me accusatory question. Why didn't you get? I got it. I got the rainbow. It's all good. New York City skyline with a little bit of video light, a little bit of speed light here. This is I think this is my FJ using the city skyline behind, trying to make this look like natural light, using my shutter speed to control how much ambient light I'm getting in there. Same thing with this, and just more of the same. A couple more of those. Natural light, little sparkler exit. My favorite part of this is the shoe on the ground, by the way. Sparklers only. Now this image is a little complicated. I know, by the way, it's almost 6 o'clock, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go about 10, 15 minutes past because I had some technical difficulties, so I'm going to go a little bit past my 60 minutes. This is one of my favorites, sort of an ending evening shot. It's a light painting, okay? It is a 30-second exposure, and I wanted to give the couple something different, something kind of special to close their evening with. And so I'll just very quickly tell you how I did it. I set the camera for 30 seconds. This is my D850 at the time. And I used the timer. Timer hit the shutter. It was open for 30 seconds. I used a little pen light. I used a little pen light on their face. I used a Stella CLX10, and I painted that background across the lake. And then I used the pen light again, and I hit the dress just a little bit. And then I defocused the lens and hit the dress so it would look a little bit like there was movement. And then the 30 seconds was up, and I looked at the frame, and it was terrible. It didn't work, but it did on the second try. And I tried it a third time, and it didn't work. I made 3 frames, and it worked on the second frame. So good for me, good for them. Try it. Don't be afraid to fail. I failed miserably 2 out of 3 times, but one of them worked. Light painting, give it a try. It has to be really dark. And there's my settings. You can see it's a 30-second exposure. I'm not lying. This was a crazy scenario. This was 1/10 of a second. I won't go into all of the technical difficulties I had in making this photo because it would take, probably 15 to 30 minutes to fully explain how this was done. But I had to let the carousel lights blur, and I had to get them with my external light. I had to get them exposed properly. There was a lot of factors that went into this technically, but there's the photo mechanic screen capture. You can see it's ISO 50. I think it's probably 1/10 of a second or somewhere, maybe 1/6 of a second, somewhere in that neighborhood. I can't see it because something's covering it thanks to Zoom. Tough image to make. And this image here, nothing wedding related, just going to show you that you can freeze action with flash duration. Okay, so you don't have to use a 60th of a second or maximum flash sync. That's another thing I talk about in my workshop extensively. Then I want to just go into moments very quickly. This is the most important facet of the wedding day for me. I am much more interested in capturing these moments than I am the details or any. This is what's going to mean something to the people 5 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now. And just to give you a little insight, Elliot Erwitt said this, and I love this. The whole point of taking pictures is so you don't have to explain things with words. And I'll just kind of go through these very quietly. Yes, I was a photojournalist, and I talk about how I went from a photojournalist into a wedding photographer. What use is having great depth of field if there's no adequate depth of feeling? The best images are the one that retain their strength and impact over the years, regardless of the number of times they were viewed. Bride asked me to go with her to see her grandmother before the wedding. She couldn't attend the wedding, and she just wanted to smell the rose. from her bouquet. Another bride saw that image on social media and wanted to repeat that. She wanted her grandmother to do the same. These are all just powerful moments. Picture is good or not, from the moment it was caught in camera. No amount of Photoshop or even now AI is going to make the moment better. And for me, images over the course of a 1,200 or more wedding career, I've been shooting now for 40 years. This is literally my 40th year in professional photography, 15 with Philadelphia Inquirer, 2 years with a weekly before, the rest is weddings, commercial work and all that kind of stuff. I've made a handful of images. That's it. A handful of wedding images that I feel important, that I feel I love, that stand the test of time for me. Ansel Adams said 12 significant photographs in any 1 year is a good crop. I mean, for me, if I like 1 or 2 a year, that's a lot. I made this one in 2004. 2002. 1999. For me, the subject's always more important than the picture. Self-explanatory. 2004. I saw this gentleman grab some flowers on his way out of the church after they kissed and everyone was recessing towards the front of the church. They went to the back. I didn't know where they were going. They didn't share this with me, but I shot out the back looking for them. And he was paying his respects to his grandparents who raised him. And then I made that right after that photo. 2002. So Liz says to me, my horse has an allergy. I said, okay, well, he sneezed in her face. So she wanted her dad to see her for the first time in an extremely traditional way, where she comes down the stairwell and I positioned myself in the right spot. Pure luck. I always end all of my images, or I should say my seminars, with this photo. And I always like to say, if it makes you laugh, if it makes you cry, if it rips your heart out, that's a good picture. Eddie Adams said that quote, and it really applies to this. And I'm going to stop the screen share here if I can. And Pete, are there questions at all?
There were some questions, but I think you answered most of them, and
okay.
you touched base on most of the things people wanted to know. So I think we are good.
Good.
Yeah, so that said, so thank you, Cliff. That was
Thank
a wonderful presentation as always. And for those of you who didn't see the link, there is a link in the chat for Cliff's upcoming seminars as well. So please take a look at that and see if that's interesting to you and sign up for those.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you to SanDisk, Western Digital. Thank you to Adorama. I just wanted to go over this just for the sake of those who actually were curious. I literally do use all that stuff I was talking about. The workflow is pretty simple. Shooting on those cards, I come home and I back up to 3 of those external drives that I showed you earlier. I use a SanDisk CF Express reader. The speed in which I'm able to do these things now, where it probably took a total of, could have been 90 minutes to 2 hours to download and back up safely, it's 35 minutes. It's really unbelievable. So, and it's only getting faster. So thank you.
And Cliff, are you still working on that like 8-year-old iMac that you were telling me about?
No. Actually, this what I'm talking to you on right now, this is a 2013 MacBook Pro, but I had the foresight to get an SSD, and it still works fine regardless of that glitch. That glitch was not the computer. My girlfriend will tell you different, but yes, I still have I still have that old iMac, but I'm using a newer iMac that I just got a new iMac last year.
All right, good.
I am doing that. Yeah. So yeah, and it's all USB-C, so it is light.
Exactly. All right, great. All right, well, thank you. Thanks everyone for attending, and keep your eyes on 42 Live for future events with us.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you.